Welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're back with another top 10 for you all, and this time it's counting down the champions that really need a rework the most. There are plenty of outdated champions in the game now that there is over 150 altogether, and some of the older champions just need a little bit of love. Riot are working their way back through these champions and have already planned a rework for Shyvana after the player base voted for him amongst the 5 total champions to vote for, some of which are in this list. So let's get started off with that number 10 position, and that's going to go to Tryndamere. Tryndamere has been in the game since the very start, and to be honest, he's really not changed that much. Tryndamere's kit brings a reckless, aggressive and infuriating kit design that either 1v9s or does absolutely nothing. Tryndamere is one of the only champions in the game to have inbuilt crit, and this just brings an unhealthy amount of RNG to his game from as early as level 1. He stacks up that fury on minions and then just starts hitting you until he crits you to death. He then basically snowballs and dives you on repeat with his ultimate, which is just not very fun to play against. When I think of how Tryndamere looks and then how he plays, it just doesn't really add up in my mind. He's literally the barbarian king with a gigantic heavy sword that somehow he drags around in one hand. That, to me, does not suit someone who attacks at the speed of light and spins around the battlefield every 0.5 seconds. How much cooler would it be if his sword was far slower and heavy hitting and his engage was more committing like a proper berserker would be? Tryndamere's ultimate that makes him unkillable is not actually that broken, but it's the fact that his mobility and insane damage combines with it to make it horrible to play against. If he was a bulkier, fighter type champion, his ultimate would still allow him to dive in and engage, but absorb some damage too. The fact is though, he plays like a melee AD hypercarry that just one-shots as many people as possible before his ultimate times out. Tryndamere looks badass. He will always be a nightmare to play against no matter what Riot do, but I just hope they give him a real rework rather than all these constant nerfs and adjustments like we've seen for so many years. Moving on to number 9, and that's going to be Singed. Now before we get started with this one, Singed mains, please do not hate me. I'm sure you all love the way that he already is, and if so, do not be offended. Singed has an awesome character design, and if you've seen Arcane, you'll know just how cool and menacing and somewhat intriguing this character is. Singed's playstyle and kit design though is just a bit outdated and feels a bit gimmicky. I mean, don't let this take anything away from how good he can be in certain games, but he's just so niche and only the Singed devoted can actually play him. So when it comes to reworking Singed though, I feel like it's got to be a smaller rework than a complete overhaul. I mean, they cannot remove the don't chase Singed mantra, which is basically one of the many unwritten rules of League of Legends. So it's all about what they can do to this champion to revolutionise and modernise him without ruining that key part of his kit. Singed Poison and his Fling are two of the more identifiable parts of his kit design, and I think these two parts of his kit probably need to stay. Maybe the rest of the abilities and his passive are what you could change to make him better though. I mean, his W and his ultimate don't really get you too excited about the Mad Chemist. Maybe he could have various vials that he creates that he can throw that all have different effects, one of which could even be his W that it is now. Maybe like a Twisted Fate gold card, but instead with different vials that have different uses. Maybe he could store something up in his ultimate over time, and when it's full he comes to life, similar to that of an R ultimate. Honestly, these are just ideas off the top of my head, and I am not the expert, so I'll leave that to the champion design team. But I do think there is definitely room for improvement with this champion, and we'd love for him to be as cool as he is in Arcane. In the number 8 spot, we've got Yorick. Now Yorick is a champion that has already seen a rework back in 2016. But when you think about it, it was 6 years ago, and this proves that yet again he feels a bit outdated. Yorick is a grave-digging necromancer, which for a lot of players is one of the coolest things you can play. He literally summons ghouls and slaps you in the face with a huge shovel, so that's pretty badass. However, it's just his playstyle that I feel lets him down. Yorick is basically only a side lane champion. He summons his maiden, he hits turrets, he takes few enemies down when he's split pushing, and that's about it. Now that's not to say that this way of winning games isn't effective, especially with Hullbreaker, but is that really the playstyle we want to have on this champion? Yorick could be so much cooler, and I just want to see these kind of champions be allowed to teamfight instead. Imagine if Yorick could raise an ally from the dead during teamfights, like a mini Chemtech soul. Imagine if his spells could allow ghouls to grab you from under the ground and lock you down like we see in all of those movies. There could be so many ways to make this champion absolutely awesome, and far less of a cheesy split push nuisance. What do you guys think? How would you rework Yorick? Would you keep him as a split pusher, or would you try and make him a bit less one-dimensional? Number 7 goes to Ryze, and this champion just gets nerfed and nerfed again until no one in the world can play him except the pros. Ryze has always just been way too strong in a competitive environment due to his scaling, his map mobility and control with his ultimate, his CC and his insane wave clear. However, for the majority of players in unorganised games, he's just not good enough. He has a poor early game that people don't know how to play with, and he just doesn't really deal enough damage either. It's about time that Ryze just got another rework. He's had a big one before, but it didn't solve the problem and ended up causing more damage. I'm not really too sure what they can do and what they will do with Ryze, but these constant nerfs just aren't helping him out. All this does is make the people who like this champion struggle even more, and the random Ryze first timers are basically becoming auto-lose games. Ryze is one of the most iconic Riot Games League of Legends champions. He's been there since the game released, and he's on so many of those badass cinematics that he just deserves to be more relevant. Hopefully, whatever they do, they can make Ryze great again. Number 6 is Sion, and Sion is a pretty cool champion, and to be honest, his kit since his original rework is pretty awesome. However, in recent years, a very unhealthy playstyle has blossomed, and I'm sure you've all had experiences playing against those Sions that just hard int and win games anyway. The concept of split pushing, of prioritizing structures and inevitably the enemy nexus is not necessarily a bad thing. But when there's simply nothing you can do about it due to Sion's passive, his tankiness, and his insane damage to structures, it's just not fun at all. Sion's kit and abilities are not what needs changing, although some people may feel differently. What actually needs changing though is the passive and the damage he deals to towers. Some players would argue that he doesn't need a rework and maybe just a few nerfs, and if this is the case then that'll probably do too. However, without a rework and by nerfing his structural damage, you may take away such a huge part of his effectiveness, and for the most part, make him redundant. Sion's kit in teamfights and the champion in general is not a problem, and if he manages to hit you with his ultimate and his charged Q, you're probably going to get domed, but getting outplayed and dying because of it is not too much to moan about. But killing a Sion in lane 25 times and ending up losing the game is not a lot of fun. Whatever the answer is to solving this problem, I'm not too sure, but something should hopefully change sometime soon. Number 5 goes to Kog'Maw, and I do not think there is any other champion that is as dependent on another champion as Kog'Maw with Lulu. The two of them together are absolutely broken, but we rarely see Kog'Maw without her. We all love monsters, and we all especially love monsters that are for some reason adorable, even if they are quite literally vomiting all over the place. Kog'Maw has a variety of incredible skins too, like Pug'Maw and the butterfly one too, so all of these things do need to stay. Throughout League's history, Kog has always been a hypercarry nutcase with no mobility or an artillery mage from the mid lane, both of which aren't exactly that great. Don't get me wrong, a fed Kog'Maw Lulu is probably one of the hardest things in the entire game to beat, and Kog'Maw's win rate is actually pretty good all things considered. But Kog'Maw could just be so much cooler than he is, and much like Tryndamere, Riot have already said they are considering giving him a rework, as they put it to a vote a few months back. AD carries are very hard to design and to balance, as we've seen with Samira and more obviously Zeri. AD carries can either be disgustingly broken or completely irrelevant, and a lot of this changes with the meta and the itemization. But if Kog'Maw was to be buffed a bit with a random bit of mobility, he'd probably be ridiculously overpowered. Kog'Maw just screams rework me, in whatever strange language Kog'Maw speaks anyway. He's probably one of the oldest AD carries in the game, but everybody loves him, so whatever Riot does with him, I for one am looking forward to it. Number 4 goes to Yuumi. So there are a few champions on this list with pretty horrific playstyles, and Yuumi is the pinnacle of this one. The idea of a champion within a champion pairing up and boosting and buffing them is pretty cool. However, it's just turned into a meme, and most Yuumi players can just AFK and let their AD carry do all of the work. The problem with Yuumi is not only this playstyle that allows her to get boosted and elo inflated, but it's also just how toxic and how insane a Yuumi can be with a fed teammate. Whether it's a fed AD carry going 1v5 or an assassin, bruiser, fighter or anything like that can just make Yuumi way too powerful. It doesn't matter how behind and how useless a Yuumi is during a game, as all they've got to do is attach themselves to a fed teammate. Kayn, Akali, Hecarim, Vladimir, Garen, Evelynn, Twitch, the list really does go on, and if that player is carrying, Yuumi makes them carry even harder. Yuumi's concept is kinda cool, and I'd love to see her being changed into more of a traditional champion that can jump in with her teammate but maybe not permanently. That way she still has to take flash and boots and walk around like anyone else, but maybe her ultimate can be that she dashes around her teammates, popping them with heals and shields or something along those lines. Healing champions are very strong this season, and there are plenty of them in the game, but they're all very squishy and you just know that you have to kill them and catch them out and focus them down. Yuumi on the other hand, you cannot do this because she hides inside her teammates and gives them 10,000 movement speed instead. Not only is Yuumi's playstyle quite infuriating to play against, but it's also just not much fun to play either. The only reason that people enjoy playing Yuumi is because it's easy and it's not up to you. Any good and skilled support player that likes League of Legends doesn't main Yuumi, that's for sure. In the number 3 position we have Illaoi, and like a few choices that we've already covered, Illaoi just has such a one-dimensional design. As long as you dodge her ultimate, you basically just kill her. Illaoi can easily take on entire teams by herself when the fights are on her own terms and in confined spaces. Those tentacles genuinely do hurt, and if you get caught up in them, you're gonna have a rough time. However, if you keep your distance, she can't really do anything. This means Illaoi is yet another champion that just sits in a side lane and pushes until she either takes your nexus or she dies. Split pushing is fine, and it's a tactic that should be used in League of Legends, but having these champions that can only do this or they are completely useless just isn't too good for the game. Illaoi is a prophet of the Great Kraken, which is incredibly badass. She rips her enemies' souls from their bodies and shatters their perception of reality. Now this all sounds incredible and deserves a kit that really complements this. Unfortunately though, Illaoi is just a bit of a tentacle slapping AoE short range split pusher, and I just can't help but feel there is so much more that could be done with this champion. Whether it's summoning the Kraken itself, surfing waves across the map, binding and locking up enemies with tentacles, or anything else that could work well with this thematic. Illaoi is an amazing character concept, and we just love to see something more from her. Number 2 goes to the man of gems, Taric. Taric is another super old champion that also received a rework back in 2016. The idea behind this rework was a bulky support that has the potential to make his whole team invulnerable. But Taric in recent years has only ever been used in funnel strats. Taric and Master Yi together was absolutely horrific, and thank God we don't have to see that much anymore. However, because of this, we just don't see Taric at all. Taric's unique stun is pretty awesome, and there are definitely parts of his kit that could potentially stay. I still remember seeing Taric's original stun, which literally was a point and click dazzly thing that followed you and stunned you, so the newer one is a lot more fun. Taric is another champion with a really cool character concept, but just falls flat as no one really enjoys playing him, and he's just not very good either. I don't think anyone would be against Taric receiving a new update, and the majority of players would love for him to be relevant again. Taric is called the Gem Knight, and this has so many possibilities, so let's hope Riot figures out how to make him good again. Finally, in the number 1 position, we've got Shyvana. Shyvana was the second highest voted champion in the rework vote that Riot launched a few months ago, which should mean she could be next on the list after Skarner. Shyvana appears as a humanoid, but her true form is that of a fearsome dragon. Anything to do with dragons will always be badass, and Shyvana becoming one with her ultimate is absolutely awesome. Unfortunately though, this champion has fallen short over the last few years and doesn't really feel like you're playing a dragon character. Instead you just farm up a bit and spam your E with as much AP as possible, which is just a bit boring and lackluster compared to what it really could be. Whether Shyvana sticks to a half human half dragon playstyle or has 2 forms to toggle through or becomes a pure dragon altogether. Whatever it is that they change, we need to feel like we're actually playing a dragon and breathing fire on our opponents and wreaking havoc on the Rift. I for one would love to see some kind of global dragon form that glides from one side of the map to the other, breathing fire on everything in its path. Or to feel the strength of a dragon when it lands, crushing everything in its path with its damage and destruction. Dragons are huge, they are scary, and they are incredibly powerful, so we need to feel this when we're playing her. Shyvana's concept is one of the best on this list, and there's not many people that would say no to a complete dragon rework. Shyvana has the potential to be one of the coolest characters in the game with the right kit, so let's see what Riot has in store for us soon. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this top 10 champions that need a rework in League of Legends video. Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments, and if there's anyone else you think that deserves a bit of attention. Don't forget to head to our website and download our desktop app before going into your next game. We have guides and builds for every single champion, so don't let you miss out on all of our useful information and advice. That's all from us here at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.